Hi everyone and welcome back. I just wanted to quickly jump on and let you know that the full version of my interview with Chris Masuak is now here, available for you to view. Hope you enjoy it. I also wanted to let you know that Chris and his band, the Dog Soldiers, that he selected for this tour of Australia, will be playing the East Coast. They're going to New South Wales. It's a 3-week tour, I think. New South Wales, Queensland, Victoria, and the ACT. I'll put the link for the tickets and all that in the description, so be sure to get your tickets. I can't wait. I've been listening to these fabulous CDs. I'll also put a link for Chris's music in my description. So look, Chris has got such a fantastic back catalogue of rock and blues and pop sort of releases. He is fronting a band called the Vivero Wave Riders, and he is based in Galicia in Spain. So be sure to check him out. I'm really looking forward to it. He's got such a rich history of playing with the wonderful Radio Birdman, the Hitmen, the Screaming Tribesmen, and the New Christ. So be sure to check it out. Chris Masuak, and playing at a venue near you.
Got it.
So, Chris Masuak, thank you, and welcome to my vlog. So, what I wanted to do, Chris, was just ask you some questions about content that's related to my vlog. So, my first question is probably, as a musician, in whatever band you wanted to sort of talk about, whether it was Radio Birdman, the Hitman, the New Christ, or the Screaming Tribesmen. Did you play at the Tivoli? And if so, what are your memories? If, obviously it was a long time ago, but do you have memories that stand out for you at the Tivoli?
Yes, we in fact did play at the Tivoli, and in the earliest days, it would have been in very, very early 1980s. And before I start, it's important to realize that when you ask a musician what their memories of a venue are, you're likely to be met with confusion because because especially in those days we were so busy running around, we often didn't quite know where we were. And it seems it seems strange to say that because Sydney's not that big, but back then you could play 5 or 6 nights a week, and we did, and sometimes twice a night. So we're running around madly, and we know we're in a venue, but we don't quite know where it is. So, but I do remember the Tivoli, and we played there with the New Christs in the earliest formation of that band.
Mm-hmm.
The New Christ at that time was basically the Hitmen,
Mm-hmm.
backing Younger.
Yeah.
He was approached by Iggy Pop's management, and they had originally wanted Radio Birdman, which was by that time defunct,
Mm-hmm.
and asked him, but he had no band. And so he spoke to me, and I offered our band. And so off we went. And he didn't even have a name for the band at that stage.
Yeah.
He had put out a single under the name New Christ. So I said, hey, look, you're already recognized as New Christ. Let's just go with that. And so that's the reason why it's my fault. It's called the New Christ. But anyway, I digress. So we're off and running with Iggy Pop, and Iggy was he was a bit surprised because he didn't realize, and none of the overseas band realized at that stage, that way down in the Antipodes, we had a very fierce and competitive pub scene, and the bands were very adept. So they were all the headline bands were extraordinarily surprised and shocked that they had competition.
Hmm.
Suddenly, the band was very good, and oh, oops, we didn't realize this. And Iggy's band was no different. He was supporting a release he just had called Zombie Birdhouse,
Hmm.
um, an execrable piece of recording,
Yeah.
and he had a band that was not was it was a I guess a subpar band, even though it had
Okay.
Frank Infante in it. The band was not really a hot band, and Australians knew Iggy Pop. I mean, he was a god in Australia, and
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
and they wanted raw power and the sound of the Stooges and whatnot.
Yeah.
And he was giving this thing which no one understood, and it was very clear that the audiences were disappointed, and the bands were perplexed, and he was getting flack from the audience because the audiences in Australia were not afraid of the headline band. They weren't in awe. If they didn't like it, they'd yell,
Absolutely. I've heard that.
throw cans and
Yeah.
whatnot. And Iggy wasn't used to this behavior, and his band didn't like it. And his
Yeah.
band really didn't like us because we could turn on a dime. We were a hot band. We'd been touring with the Hitmen for a long time, and we
Yeah.
were real tight. And we knew all the songs. We could segue from a New Christ to a Velvet Underground to a Stooges song to an Eric Burdon song on a dime, all in the same song. And Iggy was just horrified. And one day he comes pumping into the dressing, strutting in. I have a proposition. Uh, I'm going to appear on stage with you guys. And that was, oh, yeah, of course you are. Fine. We were really, really happy. And so then the night of Question at the Tivoli, I guess it was pretty much at the end of our set. In he comes strutting on stage, and it's just a blur. I have memories of him and Younger on the floor of the Tivoli stage, smashing it with their fists and
Oh, wow.
wailing away, and just he was having a ball. And our bass player turns around and says, "Hey, do you know Search and Destroy? That kind of thing."
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
huh?
Wow.
I mean, we knew
Everything.
everything, and we
Yeah.
could do anything. And he was just so happy, and the band was just monstrous. And his band didn't like it, and
Wow.
at one stage they came on, and they literally unplugged us,
Oh, wow.
and that's how the set ended.
Wow.
and
Yeah. In fact,
his
I've heard many accounts where the new Christs were so fantastic that a lot of people preferred, your live sets than these bands like Iggy Pop, the international ones that kind of came to Australia because you were so tight, you were so good.
Well, I mean, Iggy's Iggy, and
Yeah,
he's always fantastic. But
bit of character.
he's a victim of who his band is,
Yeah,
and he was a real victim of that band. I tell you, because
yeah,
I think he really underestimated the Australian audience,
yeah.
their knowledge of his music and their appreciation of him. And
Wow.
the New Christs, of course, were born from Radio Birdman, whose influences were, you know, vast, but
Yeah,
very, very deeply into that um, Iggy Pop territory, the Stooges,
yeah,
the MC5s type of stuff. Although it was much, much more than just Detroit.
yeah, of course. And I think he
Um,
did come to Australia a few times, Iggy, I believe, in that era.
he, he did, but that's the only time that we
Okay.
played. That was the first
Yeah.
time, and I think I'd be surprised if he doesn't have a memory of being blown off stage by the New Christ nearly every night.
Oh, wow.
But it was a
Wow.
wonderful, wonderful experience. He was he was always slightly distant to us because he was the headline guy and we were kept
Yeah,
away. But he
yeah,
was he was always very gracious and interested, and he liked us. He liked
yeah.
the band, and he liked what we were doing, and we liked playing with him. We could have been
Yeah.
a Iggy's backing band.
Yeah. And I guess it's a good thing even to have that kind of not competition, but that sense of wow, he just sort of admiring each other too, I guess, with the skills and the musicality of it all.
Well, yeah, but oddly enough, Australian bands didn't have that sense of working together. It was always, if I was the headline band, I'm going to screw everyone below me, and
Okay, yeah.
and many Australian bigger bands were
Yeah.
notorious for
Yeah.
doing that.
Yeah.
Um, I could name quite a few, but
Yeah.
um, what we did because of that, as a consequence of that, was that in our bands we just went, bring it. If you want to blow us off stage, do it. And we
Yeah. Wow.
always gave our support bands the full PA, all the lights except for the specials,
Yeah.
and just said, we didn't turn off the power or put limiters on PA or anything. We just said,
Yeah.
go for it. And I think that's kind of what made our shows all the more interesting, because the support bands were given the opportunity to just go for it. Whereas
Yeah.
in other cases, you could clearly tell, that was the support band, and we're the
Mm.
gods.
Yeah.
And Australia was notoriously uncooperative in that respect.
Wow.
We found it really difficult to get support bands to come on tour with us, because I
Yeah.
don't want to support this guy, I don't want to do that. We just gave up, and we
I
wanted
think
to
it,
go on the road with rock
I
and
think
roll circus type thing, and it couldn't happen.
I think there's still a little bit of that happens today, to be honest with you.
Yeah, well, they call that the tall poppy syndrome. But
Yeah.
all the bands are all struggling and scuffling away,
Yeah.
and you meet all together in some bar, and everyone's happy and fine. But then you walk away, and the next day you hear, oh, those guys, the screaming tribesmen, blah blah. You know, it's just dumb luck that you kind of make it your way up to the top, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
we always
Wow.
wanted to help everybody, but they didn't want to come along for the ride. So
Yeah,
we
that's
were always
interesting.
solitary.
That's
Yeah, it's
interesting.
weird.
I wanted to ask you, as a punter, did you actually see any bands at places like the Tivoli or I don't know, like the other venues at Sydney, like just as a
Uh,
not as a musician, as
well,
just a punter?
well, if we went to see a band,
Mm,
it would be a Blondie or something, because we
yeah,
were,
big
or
fans.
Elvis Costello, and
Yeah,
we supported the Stranglers and things like that. And
yeah,
those
wow.
venues tended to be the bigger ones, the state
Yeah,
theater type things.
yeah, yeah.
But
Okay, that's interesting.
again, having seen those bands, it was always with a sense of disappointment, because their sets were very short. Because where they came from, they tended to play a half an hour to 40-minute
Oh,
sets,
wow.
whereas Australians played an hour and a quarter plus an
100%.
encore. And most of the overseas bands came with this idea that, oh, we're a big band and you're just a bunch of hillbillies, and we're always shocked when the audiences were not in adulation.
Oh,
So
wow.
there was always a sense of, oh, what, you're not admiring us. And it was very obvious.
Yeah.
They were taken aback by this Australian desire to be impressed.
Oh, wow. Yeah, it's interesting actually, because you're right. I find that when I've gone to see, live bands, it never has it been under 45 minutes. Most of the time it's between 45 minutes and an hour. So yeah,
Yeah.
interesting. Also, Chris, what about the crowds? Because I know when I did a vlog about the family in at Rydalmere, one thing that kind of kept up, or that crept up in the comments was that the crowds at that particular venue were kind of like a mixed bag. Whereas, for example, certain venues that maybe I went to, maybe in the western suburbs of Sydney, they would sort of have just the same kind of people that would go. But I believe
Yeah.
Tivoli was very intimate and kind of attracted all kinds of people. Is that true?
Well, you have to realize there's quite a difference in the style of venue in that time. First of all, most of the venues would close by 10 o'clock, because that's when pubs closed.
Mm,
So they were early gigs. And so um, it was a less raucous kind of crowd. They weren't
Yeah.
smashed yet, but trying. Also, what tended to happen was that if you were a band that people had an interest in, the audience would go to that venue. So there was no particular scene or type of crowd at any given venue, unless it was way out where it was, western suburbs crowd,
Yeah. Yeah.
because that's the people that lived up there.
Yeah.
But if your fans wanted to go see you, they would go wherever. So the scene was not a place. The scene was where the scene was, where
Yeah.
the
The
people
music.
went.
Yeah.
So
Yep. Yep.
so
Yep.
that's why you got this motley crew all over the shop in those
Yeah.
days, because they came often great distance to see you,
Yeah.
from the city or the outer suburbs to the
Yeah.
Tivoli. And
Yeah.
so that's why it looked like a grab bag. You
Yeah.
know, you were the scene, the band and the people were the scene at
Yeah.
that
Of
place at
course.
that time.
Yeah.
So
So
a different
that's
vibe.
That's interesting. Yeah, that's interesting. And I think 1983, from my research, looks like it was a big year for the Tivoli. And I think, yeah, I was probably thinking even, I found it interesting that a place like the Tivoli could have like a pop band, and maybe a rock band like the Choir Boys or John Paul Young or someone like that. And then they'd have Johnny Thunders.
Any
I think Johnny Thunders
anything.
played there.
Yeah, anything.
And I love that. That's great.
Yeah,
Yeah,
anything.
that's really cool. So also, I wanted to know your opinion about the closures of so many places in Sydney, in particular, because I guess that's where most of my sort of vlogs are based.
Hmm.
I know that there's been developments with, the introduction of pokies and the gentrification of suburbs in Sydney. Yeah, I don't know. I mean, I'm optimistic that the live music scene is still around, and there's lots of really good venues in Sydney that I've been to, like Marrickville's thriving at the moment.
Hmm.
Kenmore is
Yeah,
still
I heard
there.
that.
The Lansdowne is still having bands. What else? The Even up at where I live on the Central Coast, and there's a great venue in Gosford called the Drifters Wharf. Newcastle's got some venues.
Hmm.
Quite optimistic that it hasn't died, but I know
Yeah.
there was a period when the venues were closing, and quite a number have closed down. So I don't know. What do you reckon was like the Hopetown, for example? Those sort of little small pubs, and yeah,
Yeah, I think it all comes down to real estate.
yeah. I think
It's
money.
really all about real estate,
Yeah, development.
and also there's a change in. I mean, there's a whole generation that's not particularly interested in live music. They're into the club scene, and it's
Yeah,
different musical tastes, different
yeah,
musical times.
yeah. That's
You
right.
know, we were just fortunate to have lived in a kind of a thriving and pioneering environment, and
Yeah,
got to see the venues rise. But you know I wasn't really around when the venues collapsed, and I think it's
yeah,
really all about changes of musical taste
yeah,
and gentrification.
yeah. I
but
agree.
but um, I'm just having a quick look at the venues that I'm playing in when I get there in May.
Oh, fantastic!
um,
You're coming in May.
I'm coming in at the end of May. I think my first gig is on May 19th, and I'm trying to find the names of the venues if you know
It's
them.
probably in Marrickville or maybe the Enmore or
Yeah, I'm playing
places in
Marrickville Bowling
Marrickville.
Club.
Yeah, yeah.
I'm playing something called La La La's in Wollongong,
Oh, okay.
Lincoln Pin, the Basement in
Oh, Lincoln.
Canberra.
Did you say Lincoln Pin?
Yeah,
That's near me.
yeah. Is that a good place?
Yeah, it is. Well, the Sunny Boys are on there next week.
Oh yeah, okay. They're doing their goodbye tour.
Yeah, they are actually.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. And the
yeah.
Live Spiders actually, they're on the 25th.
Which Lime Spiders?
Mick
The
Blood
Nick Blood? Okay.
and I can't remember the other guys, but yeah, they I think
Yeah,
they're on the 25th of Feb.
yeah. Well, I'm doing the Basement in Canberra,
Oh, good.
Northcote social club. I'm not
That's
sure
in
where that is.
Melbourne. Yeah, that's in Melbourne.
Um, and the mosh pit or something.
Okay.
So I'll be there at the end of May, from around the 19th, going into the first week of June.
Oh,
Um,
fabulous.
and I'll be visiting some of these venues, and I'll see
Oh,
what's changed.
good.
See what's
Yeah.
changed.
Yeah.
See what's
No, that's
changed about
awesome.
the
I
music
think
scene.
I think also, Chris, I wanted to ask you about French's. I didn't even really know about French's till last year,
Okay.
but that's in
Yeah.
Oxford Street. Um,
Oxford Street.
yeah,
It was between. It was between
near the Fun
Burke,
House.
between Burke and Crown.
Yeah,
It was about a half a block away from the Fun House. The Fun House
yeah,
is right at Taylor Square, but
yeah,
this is kind of more or less in the middle of the block.
yeah.
And it was kind of it was more of a hang.
Oh, okay.
People would go there before they went out, kind of thing. Downstairs, the top floor was just a big space with a long bar, and of course it was a wine bar, so it was like the girls drank blackberry nip and the guys drank strongbow cider, that kind
Oh,
of vibe.
wow. Yeah,
And there
yeah,
wasn't, other stuff. It was wine bar.
yeah.
And then downstairs was a place where they had a lot of more, I don't know if you call them underground, but more grassrootsy type band,
Okay.
Rupert B, Funkified Filth, and
Oh, right. And I think I read
the
the 4 Day Riders.
4 Day Riders, the bands like
Yeah,
that. They were kind of like just a bunch of guys, and often playing very, very cool music, but it wasn't like a big venue.
yeah.
Um,
And were you there with
the
Birdman or?
no, that was before my time.
Oh, okay,
Yeah,
yeah.
that was
Because
just before
Birdman
my
was more
time.
Funhouse, wasn't it?
Yeah, well, see what happened with Birdman. With Birdman, they horrified the bars by the way they looked and they played, and by the sound of
Hard
their
and
music,
fast.
and by their audience. The audiences that came
Yeah,
along horrified the venue. So the band tended to have problems getting a gig. And so what they had to do was create their own uh, event.
yeah, yeah,
And the Funhouse was a place where uh, the band could create its own events, and also stage and promote bands who were of a similar nature or aspiring nature.
yeah. And
And
of course,
and
that
it,
drew the crowds. Yeah, the fans.
yeah, yeah. And the
Wow.
band eventually kind of outgrew the Funhouse. There's a stage
Yeah,
at which it was just like too big for the place, literally,
yeah.
because it wasn't a big place. It was just a little, you know,
It's
little
so interesting.
room.
Yeah, it's interesting. I actually worked in Surrey Hills for 10 years and I often walk past that place. So,
Yeah,
yeah, so much history in Sydney with various venues like the ones that we've spoken about that are no longer there. So, but I just really enjoy that we're still talking about them. And I kind of even want to know that young people of today have got that history because there have been times where I've even sort of struggled finding information about
yeah,
venues. So I think that's why I'm kind of enjoying, taking that trip down memory lane and sort of digging deep and yeah.
yeah. Well, you also have to build in the time, the nature of the scene, because there were licensing laws, which meant there were prohibitions on how long a venue could stay open, which determined
100%.
how quickly, there's sort of an urgency to get to places, and often some of these venues were far away from where everyone lived, Sydney being so
Yeah.
big. And of course, the public transport system has always been bad there, but
Yeah.
it was less efficient even back then. So people were, a little bit urgent in getting to these places. So, they all arrive early. They'd all kind of, there's this huge community. There's a great sense of, joining something. And then it finished, there's a cutoff
Yeah.
time, it was like, oh, what do
Yeah.
we do? So,
Yeah.
so the earlier nights, more action, more color,
Yeah.
more insanity
Oh,
and urgency to
fantastic.
it.
I think you're very lucky that you did experience that kind of just that. vibrancy. I think it was very vibrant, and yeah, I just, I mean, I kind of started, I think, in about 86,
Hmm.
because I did live in the western suburbs. I sort of limited initially around sort of that area, but then I ventured and started to go to places like the Cardoma, and I think it was called the Mansell Room at one stage, but
Yeah, yeah,
when I went there, it
yeah.
was called Springfields and places like that. But yeah, I've just noticed, Chris, that this is going to end in 10 minutes. So we've been
Okay.
a while, and it's been so nice. So I might have to kind of wrap it up, but I'd love to talk to you again if you're willing. If
Yeah, of course.
yeah, if I've got another
Yeah.
venue that because I wanted to do the fun house actually,
Well,
and
there's a wealth of information in that one. Yeah.
yeah, so
And possibly talking to the people that went there would be,
100%,
good
yeah.
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, no, 100%. So, but I'm looking forward to the gigs actually. So you'll have to make sure that it's advertised and
Oh
that
yeah, yeah,
we all know about it. And yeah, I'd love to even promote it and
yeah,
talk
for sure.
about it. It's yeah, it's just
Yeah, I'll be there at the end of May. So I think starting on about the 19th, and we'll be with Stuart Wilson and Tony Bombosh from the Lime Spiders on
oh
bass,
wow, oh
and
great,
also be promoting my book,
oh
um,
okay,
Faith and Practice in Bedlam.
oh
So
fantastic,
it's going to be a flurry of activity.
oh good
You know,
stuff.
yeah.
Yeah, no, that's awesome, excellent. Well, thank you so much. It's been
You're
an
welcome.
pleasure. Yeah, I've really enjoyed it. So,
Okay, you're most welcome, and hasta la
yeah.
próxima.